Okay, you ready to go?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It makes a change from good morning, doesn't it? Good afternoon and welcome to the February meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Norfolk District Council. Our first item on the agenda is to receive apologies.
Just have apologies from Councillor Liz Withington.
From
Liz Withington.
Okay, yes, thank you. And any substitutes today?
Sorry, Matt, could I just say, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I will need to go at about 3:30 this afternoon. So,
Right.
thank you, if we last that long.
Well, we'll endeavour to aim for that finished.
Thank you.
Can't guarantee it. Thank you. Public questions and statements?
None received.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. So that's the meeting that we had on the 12th of January. So if we go through them page by page for accuracy, please. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Are you content that they are a fair and accurate record of that meeting? And if so, I will sign them as such. Thank you. Right. Item 5 is items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations in relation to today's business guided by the sheet that's in our agenda pack today? Yes.
Just, it's not pecuniary, but my daughter is now an employee of Open Wide and the Chroma Pier, so I just wanted to, just to cover it.
Okay. That's noted. Thank you. Any others? Right, thank you. Petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of any.
Again, none received.
Thank you. 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee's reports or recommendations.
Yes, there's just one to report there in relation to the car parking charges report that came to scrutiny last month. Cabinet did accept the recommendation to increase charges in line with CPI inflation. I think there were some slight amendments to that variation on specific locations. They did not accept the recommendation to raise season ticket prices. I don't know if Eric wants to add anything to that.
Councillor Seawood.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, can you see me? I've nothing to add, Chair.
You're hiding behind 2 sets of heads.
Yes. You see, they're younger than I am and they're taller than I am.
I've got your. I'm visual.
I suppose all we had, as I indicated at Cabinet, I'd like to thank Scrutiny for the way they looked at this and the comments they made. There is no ideal solution to parking charges and what you increase or don't increase in relation to them. The view of the Cabinet in the end was that to provide the greatest help to our residents, that season tickets, which are primarily bought with them, was the best ones to freeze, which is what we did. And the other charges, as quite a lot of them, but not all of them, relate to visitors and people coming here, that was a more viable area in which to have a level of increase. So that is what we did. But as I say, there is no perfect solution to this, but that was the rationale in the end that the Cabinet took in the question of car parking charges.
Okay, thank you for that. Any comments on that? No. Okay, thank you. Was there anything you wish to add on that?
No, that's all fine.
Okay, thank you. Right, then, I'm aware that two people need to leave the meeting earlier than 3:30. So what I propose to do is to bring item 15 forward to allow Mr. Hems to leave first, and then of the items that Councillor Seward has, he would wish that we consider the fees and charges in his presence, and so I'll bring that one forward next, and then we'll consider the rest of the agenda in the order that it presents, if you are agreeable to that. Okay, right, okay. Over to you, Officer Hems.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you once again for your forbearance in moving your agenda around to accommodate my numerous meetings that I seem to have every day. Members will recall that a previous or last overview in scrutiny that Serco attended, and we shared the gap analysis with members in terms of where we felt Serco were not achieving all of the things in accordance with either the authority's requirements or their own method statements. The representative from Serco, Peter Aylward, undertook to go away and begin working on that straight away, and they have indeed been doing so. So they have now come back to the authorities with an updated position as to where they believe, out of that just short of 500 items, they now believe they are. So of those, and this is still a bit of work in progress between the authorities and Serco, so we've not had chance to, I suppose, we're still going through the processes of the three authorities to just validate and confirm this position with them, and there are some points of discussion. So out of that nearly 500, there's nearly 200 of those that Serco have now confirmed that they feel that they can have evidence they are fully compliant with the contract requirements. They have identified 92 that they feel that they are not undertaking currently according to the authority's requirements or method statements. There are 34 of those which we think we have accepted are duplicates. So although they're in different parts of the method statement, if they're either doing it, they're a duplicate line. So the requirement is the same in multiple areas. So that's one. We have 40 areas where we are looking at establishing or providing more clarification. And I think some of those are about changes in circumstances and changes in the way things have been done against what was originally bid, because of circumstances, because of changes of approach, and because of those things. So they're not within, they're areas that we just need to iron out, basically. They're typical of a contract. There were a few that were just headings, etc., which can come out. There are 27 areas that they are not currently delivering, but form part of their target move to the target operating model. So this is the change around their provision of collection in terms of their model around how they would do the collection rounds. And that is something that obviously is being delivered sequentially across the authorities. So Breckland will go first, followed by Kings Lynn, and then we are planning on current timescales to move to a new target operating model for collections, probably in June, or well, almost certainly late May, middle of June. There are 32 of the requirements that they are partly meeting, but not fully, and they will seek to do those, and 59 elements which they are part delivering, but they can't fully deliver until such time as the target operating model comes into place. So I think you can see, in terms of the position that was perhaps presented in terms of the gap analysis, there is progress in terms of what they're saying they are delivering, and they have certainly, it's enabled them to identify their activity in terms of programme of work, many of which are linked to the move to the target operating model. So from my perspective, there's still work to be done. I am reasonably confident that we will continue to work on these together and reach a position of where I can give you further update at the next meeting. And whilst we may not have everything implemented by April, we will certainly have a plan for how those elements that are missing will be delivered, and a further update in terms of the move towards the target operating model. So I just wanted to give you that position, but I'm happy to take any questions from you. Oh, sorry, the other thing I would just say, when I talk about these items, one of the things that's partly delivered, for instance, is there's a requirement to have X number of brushes of a certain type on the contract. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think they're 1 or 2 short on it when they did this analysis. So they're very quick fixes. In the grand scheme of things, I think what we need to bear in mind is that generally the big ticket items, the collection of the waste, etc., continues to be delivered on a day-by-day basis across the contract to a high standard in general. Thank you. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful because you've given us some very useful metrics around that, how that 500 is broken up and the a degree of progress. I guess the test question for me is, are you satisfied as the responsible officer for contract with the progress that's been made so far? And I think you've indicated you're fairly confident that by the time you reach April, it will be substantially job done, but that's yet to be proven. So how comfortable are you?
I've used an analogy recently of a vehicle. So it feels like the wheels are spinning very fast at the moment, but we're getting some forward momentum. But there are some, I think that we'll get more. And as we pick up traction, a lot of that will get delivered quite quickly. It is important, I think, to realise that the move to the target operating model is I think, from a customer service point of view, but also in terms of delivery of the contract, essential to enabling Serco to have the capacity to be able to make these further developments work well. And so we have had a number of discussions between myself and Serco around the prioritisation of some of that work. They've had a number of deadlines around the target operating model that they've had for Breckland that they've had to meet in terms of the communications plan and the and sharing round redesign and things like that with the authorities and getting agreement. So that has had to, I'm happier that they're prioritising those things. These added value bits and bits that are missing, we can continue to work on those and get them in place. And I think that they will generate increasing capacity to do so as they begin to get the target operating model running.
Good. Okay, that sounds like a fairly positive answer to me. I don't want to get down into too much detail today because we were only aiming to get from you an update and a general direction of travel and a kind of indication of pace, and whether we were likely to reach that point in April with some degree of success, how likely we were to be successful. So I don't want to get, as I said, into too much detail, but are there any substantive comments on what Mr. Hems has said? Are you comfortable, Councillor?
Thank you. Just a quick question. Have they invoiced us yet? Because I remember they said they were running a deficit but hadn't invoiced us. And I don't know whether that was from when the contract began. And it might be, I think, beneficial for us to have that before the end of this financial year.
Yes, we are now being invoiced on a regular basis. There are two parts to the invoice. There is the fixed amount. So that is the amounts that are part of the what we call the core invoice. And then there's a variable monthly bill. And that is the elements that might relate to the number of, the monthly amount for the number of waste customers on our garden bin subscription scheme, which obviously we pay on a per bin per lift basis associatedly. So the core invoices are definitely coming through. The fixed, the variable monthly billing are coming, and we've paid some, but we're just working through in terms of that on an ongoing basis to make sure we're reconciling them adequately. But yeah, they are coming through.
So the wheels are spinning and the money is flowing. That's good. Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, given the extent of this contract, it's obviously taking more of your management time, and I wonder whether you considered that in the initial stages and whether you consider that in the context of the value for money that they're providing.
I think there are two elements to my response. So the first is that I have been the supervising officer for this contract across the first 2 years. That was the agreement that we had between the three authorities. And the reason that I was the first supervising officer, because Norfolk went alone in the first year, so it made perfect sense. And then whilst the other two mobilised, it made sense for me for that continuity. My involvement in terms of that supervising officer role will come to an end naturally and be handed over, I think, subject to final agreement to a Breckland officer. So actually my management involvement with this will reduce. I think what we need to bear in mind is that in terms of value for money, procuring in this way with two other authorities and in the way that we did has provided this authority. I wouldn't say it has provided better value than if we had gone alone. And I think the amount of time as an officer that we invest into this contract is seen in terms of the benefits that we have in terms of that ongoing and continued value for money. So yes, there is an element to which the time that I and others spend in it is more than we probably envisaged. However, I think it still represents value for money in terms of the service and costs that we have associated with this contract at the current time.
Okay, thank you. Are we all done? Okay, it appears we are. Thank you very much indeed for that.
Very much.
And we'll move on to fees and charges, item 13. Councillor Seawood.
Thank you, Chairman. I've also got Lucy here just in case there's any particular questions that I can't answer. This is a standardised report that comes to council each year, setting out the fees and charges for a range of services which we provide. Some of them, the charges remain the same, others there is an increase. In terms of some of the charges, such as the electoral registrars, some of the enforcement work we do under Housing Acts are statutory charges and are determined, the determination is outside of our control. So most of the charges are listed there. There are some which are delegated to officers and in conjunction with myself to approve. The one that particularly caught my eye was the charges for waste collection in terms of garden bins and also trade waste. The reason why trade waste has been looked upon as being a delegated matter was because we didn't want to alert competitors to what we may be charging in future years. But I am advised, having spoken to Scott Martin yesterday evening, that in fact they will be coming out with those proposals probably next week or the week after. In the case of garden bins, they are currently at £48.50. £48. The income that we get for brown garden bins is in excess of £1 million. We have something like 22,500 customers. That is gradually increasing. We're also entering the stage with our garden bins where they're coming to the end of their expected life, which is about 15 years. And we all started that way back in 2004-05. So there has to be some replacements, and it is expected that the price that we charge will in fact pay for a gradual programme of replacements over a number of years. But Mr. Chairman, you won't be surprised when I tell you that the cost of replacing garden bins, because of the materials that are used, are going up in price. So I was advised by Scott Martin yesterday, there had been an increase of 10%. He's now expecting an increase of another 10%. So that really is all I have to say about fees and charges, but the information is in front of you, and clearly between Lucy and myself, we will do our best to answer any questions that yourself and the committee may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No, it looks as though you've mopped all the points up, Councillor Seawood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, there has been a little press inquiry about the administrative charge that will be charged people for on the waiting list for beach huts and chalets. The reason that there is an increase there from £25 to £45 is simply because it's such a long time ago since that was changed, that the figure of £25 no longer covers our costs of actually putting people on the waiting list. Can I say there is a waiting list for beach huts and chalets? The demand exceeds the level of supply. And also I would point out that we do have huts and chalets ourselves, which are available for weekly lets, and people can always go down that avenue should they wish to do so. Thank you.
Councillor Penfold coming in at the last minute.
On the outside rail. I'm just thinking about the replacement of the garden bins and or whatever bins we replace. Do we have a plan of sort of environmental disposal of the old bins, please? How are we going to get rid of those?
Perhaps Councillor Lloyd is better able to answer that.
Yes, perhaps I'll pose it another way. Can we have a think about how we dispose of those?
I suspect these are manufactured. I don't know for sure. Councillor,
I suppose the model answer might be they'll be disposed of in accordance with current regulations.
current regulations, which you took the words out of my mouth. But I have a horrible feeling that these, because of the rigid nature of this and the hard wearing nature of these bins, I'm not sure they'll be recyclable, but they might be able to be reused in some way.
We'll leave that one hanging then. If you'd like to come back to us in due course.
I'll come back.
All right, okay. Thank you very much indeed then. So let's just go to the recommendation. Fees and charges in accordance with the 1st of April 22 as included in Appendix A, and B, the delegated authority be given to the Section 151 officer in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance and relevant heads of service to agree those fees and charges not included in Appendix A as required as outlined in the report. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? I've got Councillor Heinrich and Councillor Spagnola seconding. And could I have a show of hands then to support that? That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you. Right, reverting back to our batting order then, let's go back to item 10, which is the capital strategy for 22-23. Councillor Seawood again.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, this is a report that's we're required to make ultimately to full council. The reason that is set out in the summary of the paper, along with the reason for the recommendation, and the cabinet is recommending to full council that the capital strategy and prudential indicators for 22-23 are approved. If members have any particular questions, I'm sure Lucy will be able to deal with.
Thank you. Any questions on capital strategy? No? No takers? Okay, right. Can I have then a proposer and a seconder then, please? Councillor Blathwaite and Councillor Heinrich. Propose and second. Can I have a show of hands then, please? Thank you. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you. Turning to item 11, investment strategy for 22-23. Councillor Seawood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, the report sets out the reason that this is required to be brought before council. It is recommended that the Cabinet is asking that you resolve that the investment strategy is approved.
Thank you. Any questions on the investment strategy for 22-23? No? Okay, right. Could I then have a proposer and a seconder in relation to that recommendation, please? I've got Councillor Brown and secondly. Right, okay. Can I have a show of hands then, please? Thank you. Item 12, Treasury Management Strategy for 22-23. Councillor Seawood.
Again, the report sets out the reason why we have to do this and bring it before council, and that the Cabinet and that the council will be asked to resolve that the Treasury Management Strategy is approved. I'll just say, with all of these reports, they are fairly standard reports we have to do on an annual basis. I do note, Chairman, your comment at the Cabinet meeting where we have to have separate papers for the investment strategy and the Treasury Management Strategy. And Lucy has indicated she will provide an answer to you, I think, for that. Can I just say one thing? Whilst these are sort of fairly routine reports, if in fact we were had significant long-term borrowings in order to fund investment programs in properties like airports or shopping centres, or we were investing in some stocks and shares that were falling significantly in value, these reports, I think, would be of more particular interest and would be deserving of scrutiny. But thankfully, the council is not in that position.
Thank you. How about an energy supplier?
We're not.
Hello, Warrington.
You know, we are not there yet. You know, like you, I do notice from time to time local authorities that have got into difficulties with some of these things, particularly airports and shopping centres, but thankfully it doesn't involve us.
Yes, I think some have done it better than others, so to speak. Right, okay, thank you. So in relation to that recommendation, can I have a proposer and a seconder then, please? Councillor Varley. Councillor. Thank you. Right, those in favour, all in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on then to item 14, which is the Chroma Pier Pavilion, the pier management contract. And again, no, that's Councillor Gay.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Matt is just putting up a nice backdrop for us. Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. You will know that the recommendations contained within this report were resolved last Monday at Cabinet. The report gives you a history of the Council's relationship with Open Wide. It suggests a range of possibilities that were open to the Council, and it lays out each of the recommendations which were finally resolved. Would you like me to go through those recommendations, Chairman?
I think you can take it as read that we've actually read them through, but if there's anything you want to highlight, that would be fine.
Yes, well, the first recommendation agreed an extension of the lease for Open Wide. This is something that has happened on several occasions. As the report tells you, the Council has had this relationship with Open Wide since 2001, and the contract was formally renewed again, I think, in 2018. So that is not an unusual arrangement. There are other organisations with which the council has dealings who have requested similar considerations at this time as a result of COVID. The lengthening of a lease always gives longer security, and it is reassuring to any grant givers who are appealed to at any point in the life of the lease. The second recommendation suggests that the council is prepared in principle to explore, and I pay attention to those words, prepared in principle to explore a risk-sharing approach to the 2022 season. So it's not an ongoing liability, nor is it a sum of money that will necessarily be needed, nor do we know quite how much it would be, though if you look at section 4.4 of the paper, you will see that the cost of a season will be in the vicinity of £300,000. So I think we can all work out for ourselves what a share of that might be. The third recommendation which was agreed was budgetary provision, £45,000 to upgrade bar and food services. What the recommendation perhaps does not make abundantly clear is that this is an obligation which the council would have in any case. There's not much space there, and this is a recommendation which environmental health would favour for us. The last one, working closely with Open Wide to explore broadening the offer. This is what we do with all of the people we have contracts with. We talk to them and try to assist to see if they can increase their revenue potential. So that's what lies behind all of these. There are a couple of other things that I would like to say. It would be quite wrong to think that Open Wide has done nothing to try to help itself through this. You will all know that the 2020 season was cancelled entirely, so that means there was no revenue from a seaside special in 2020. But Open Wide did receive 2 cultural recovery grants from the Arts Council, one from the first tranche, which was £227,000 and £100, and another from the second tranche of 125,000. So that was able in some ways to underwrite the 2020 season. But I think you will all understand that when a theatre closes, there are no bar receipts, there are no ticket receipts, there is no income, even though you may have already put out the money for the next season. For example, to pay for the cast, for example, to pay for sets, to pay for costumes, to pay for the promotion and advertising, to sell the tickets. So it's not clear what the circumstances for the 2022 season will be at the moment. Things look good at the moment. It looks as though we're moving out of the pandemic. It looks as though that season may go ahead as well as usual. And if we have the levels of visitors that we've had previously, everything may be fine. But this is a precaution. This second recommendation is precautionary, Chairman. Because I think it's fair to say that most of us in this room today would like to see the survival of the Seaside Special Show, because that's what we're talking about here today, not funding the pier itself, but funding the Seaside Special. And I think that gives you the background, Chairman, to why we took the decisions that we did. And it seems to have been welcomed as a series of decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just clarify on something? On your proposals, on D, it's to agree the council works closely with Open Wide to explore broadening the offer. Do we still impose a restriction on them putting on a pantomime, which some members may not be aware of, but I believe years ago, when they wanted to put pantomime on the pier, we didn't encourage it because of the little theatre in Sheringham. Is that correct, Tim? No.
Councillor Rest, I'm not quite sure of the chronology of this because I know that there was a time when when Open Wide did not put on a Christmas show, and it may be that what they have now is the Christmas show, and that may be the result of the situation that you described, because I also remember a similar discussion about from years ago about pantomime at Christmas on the pier, but I can't go further than that. I would have to write to Open Wide and ask. I am not aware that they are seeking to put on a specific pantomime at the moment, but I do know they have and promote their Christmas show.
Can I come back? Sorry. That's fine, and I understand that, but surely what you're asking is for this council to come up with some ideas or anything that you think will help promote more of it. And it may be that they may still think there's a restriction if we haven't got one, and that we may wish to go back and say, do you want to put on? I don't see why they can't have an end of pier show and a pantomime. To me, that there can be two completely different things. One is obviously, you know, for a different, maybe an audience.
No, I don't either, but they do work in very close, they work very closely with this council, and certainly the chief executive and I have been in 2 meetings relatively recently with Open Wide, and no such thing was mentioned. I think they've got ideas of their own, Councillor Rest. I think they are thinking along the lines of some themed weekends, some other imaginative things that they can do. And I think that that's what that's referring to, that they are thinking about how else they can use that space to increase revenues. And I think I should add that once upon a time, not very long ago, this council quite normally and routinely gave over £80,000 a year to Open Wide to run this show. And unfortunately, we have shifted that, and in 2019, £20,000 in profit sharing arrangement came back to this council from Open Wide. But unfortunately, that the £20,000 that might have been expected in 2020 simply didn't occur for reasons which I think you will all understand. So we have moved from a situation of an absolute constant annual subsidy to actually having a profit sharing arrangement, which should by now have been totally beneficial to this council. So what we're talking about here is not in any way a failing institution or a failing performance. These are the effects of COVID that has caused reconsideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Rest, would you like an answer to that question?
No, I think that's, oh yes, we will.
Sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. Got Councillor Cushing and then Councillor Penfold. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to come to just ask a question around option B, which I raised, I believe, in Cabinet in terms of the risk sharing. I think though the figure is, as you say, is not stated, I think you quoted the figure of something like 130,000 may be the potential option there. I mean, are there any other options that they could look at? I mean, is that something that they could insure against?
Obviously, I don't know what Open Wide's insurance arrangements are. That is a question that I would have to ask them. I know in the nation as a whole, there were questions about the insurance for theatre performances in general, because I know that a lot of the venues in London and throughout the country had insurance, and their insurance company said that COVID didn't fall into these things that were insured against. So I can't answer that in detail. I can see if I can find an answer. I would write to Open Wide and see what I could find out. But I know that there have been problems in general with insurance. And I probably should stress now that this has been a national problem. I mean, the Bristol Old Vic, which is the oldest theatre in the country, thought that it was within 8 weeks of having to mothball and close completely last year. So again, I'd just like to stress, we're not talking about a group which hasn't been doing a good job. We're talking about particular circumstances. but I will inquire about the story of their insurance. Thank you. Yes.
And would you like that explored? Is that something you are willing to take on then, Councillor Gay?
Yes, but it will probably be a confidential answer because that is a commercial, that will be commercial and in confidence to them. So maybe even if I had the answer this afternoon, I'd have to go into private session to discuss it. And I wouldn't want to do that. So it might be that I just write to Councillor Cushing with the answer. Thank
All
you.
right. If that's acceptable to others. Okay, thank you. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Gay, for the presentation. I'm just looking at recommendation C, so that the council provides £45,000 for upgrade to bar and food service area within the Pavilion Theatre, and referring that down to section 1.2, where it says that the contractor Open Wide is responsible for the maintenance of non-structural internal fixtures and fittings in the theatre, restaurant and gift shop. So my question is that £45,000 for the structural refurbishment of the restaurant? And by this, I assume that Open Wide is then responsible for the fittings of that, chairs, tables, or whatever other fittings.
I haven't seen plans for this, so I don't know how it would be allocated. It has been explained to me that this is something that the council would normally do and it is in the interest of the council to do, but I don't know what other sums of money may be being spent by Open Wide on that or are not.
Would you be able to fight? I suppose we don't want to set a precedent really to if the contract says that Open Wide is responsible for the internal fixtures and fittings of a space, and we start paying for those, then that's probably something we shouldn't want to. That's not a precedent we want to set. Maybe if we are responsible only for the external fitting structures, as it were. It's a bit of a fine point, but I wonder if we should just make that clear as to what they are responsible for and what we.
Would you like me to make further inquiry and write to you?
Yes, please. Thank you.
I will do my best to do that.
If it helps, I was on the working party, and I think Councillor Lloyd, you were on the working party when we put this contract together. My understanding was that the council undertook to fund improvements of a capital nature, whereas Open Wide would undertake the routine maintenance. So if something broke, needed repairing, they would undertake that, but we would invest in the pier in various regards. I suppose you could start with the structure to begin with, and there's a substantial investment there. I seem to remember that one of the things that we were going to do, and I presume we have, was to update lighting and seating, I think, within the theatre itself. That was one of the early pieces of work, and clearly that's a capital spend. Whereas if the seats needed cleaning, for example, that would be something that Open Wide would undertake. That's just my lay understanding of what the situation is. Councillor Gay.
That entirely accords with my understanding. I just don't have it in writing here, and I'm always loath to pronounce on things when I don't have an absolute hard and fast written. But my understanding is the same as yours, Councillor. And I wasn't on that group, but that is how it has been explained to me as well. Thank you.
Okay, it's good to know my memory is not that bad. Councillor Adams.
It was really just further to what you were saying, Mr. Chairman. So entirely correct, but there are some additional elements that the district council is responsible for, including the dressing rooms. So, for instance, if they were to be upgraded, that would be Open Wide's responsibility. So there are some exclusions. So it's a bit more complicated than that. My memory is the same. All I would say is perhaps, in future, when it's allowable, we could undertake a visit for members again. There are some new members of the council. Some people maybe haven't had a chance to have a look at the pier. Behind the theatre, etc. So that might be of interest to some members in the future, and I'm quite happy to look at arranging that.
Councillor Gay, thank you.
I think that would be a really lovely idea because I haven't attempted to pull any heartstrings here this afternoon, but this is a totally unique event in the world. And some of you will know that a German filmmaker came to make a film about Cromer and about the Seaside Show. It was put on, I think, on December the 19th. There are no comparisons for this sort of thing. We still have some nice piers in this country that are well maintained, but they do not have the kind of updated but traditional Edwardian features that we have at Cromer Pier. It is an historic asset, and there is considerable economic research on seaside communities to show that such historic assets are a tremendous draw from the point of view of visitors, and of course bringing people into the area who may stay and go to restaurants and so on. So although it is a delightful feature for those of us who can go and walk along a pier or perhaps go regularly to the Seaside Show, it does play an important part in our local economy. And of course, things like the Christmas show extend the season. Some of these added things, anything that's done on the pier has the potential to extend our season. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Just picking up on that suggestion, Councillor Adams, I just wonder if it might be worthwhile perhaps a broader look at that, and perhaps a presentation or a briefing, a member briefing. We spend a lot of money on that pier in capital terms. We spend other monies in terms of revenues. We've got this contract in place, and that contract was negotiated and in place before many of our current members were elected. And it might be useful for them to have at least a grasp of what that contract is and how the situation, how the contract has worked, albeit much of the time that the contract has been in place, it's been blighted by, the restrictions of COVID. But I think it would be helpful if members had an understanding of the nuts and bolts of that. If not, the detail stuff. I think something like that might be useful. I don't know how other members feel. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you. I mean, you're talking about reputational risks and the fact that it's of very real and genuine significance to the local tourism offer. So picking up what you said, could we not be a little bit more precise as to what financial benefit it actually brings the area in terms of, quantifying what you say the economic uplift is in terms of extra stays and extra fish and chipses and all that sort of stuff? Because I think that would make me feel different about the decision I'm going to make. Thank you.
You raise a very valid point. I'm not sure whether Officer Hume would be able to supply quite that, but Officer Hume, would you like to respond?
I think I could pass that task very neatly onto our economic growth team, who, although it's money related, might be slightly better placed than me to provide an answer, but I can follow that up with them. They'll have a lot more information about frequency of stays and things like that, which would be useful for that sort of calculation. So I'm happy to sort of go back to them and raise that with them and provide an answer.
Okay, right, thank you. And I've got Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a little bit varied, really. I mean, I do agree with Councillor Gay. I mean, we don't have many of these facilities left around the country or around our seaside resorts, and I think we should treat it rather more carefully than perhaps we do. And just picking up on Councillor Penfold's point, I'd just like to cross-reference two things here. Option 4, operating some food concessions. I mean, if I was an operator on any business, I would want to maximise every opportunity to produce income. So my first question is there a restriction so that we can't, or the operator can't have food? Because food is very profitable, and I mean, that's what keeps most pubs going. The second point is, if we've got the £45,000 budget here in refurbishment terms, is that facilitating anything in option 4, sorry, or does option 4 need further works, or is option 4 under the open wide, nearly said open reach, that would be a disaster, open wide side of things? Because I think we really should make the most of it, because to see it go into decay would be dreadful. We've got a contract that, had it not been for COVID, I think possibly, and I haven't seen the contract, most people would have been happy with. So why don't we give the operator every opportunity to earn more money from the contract that they have?
Councillor Gay.
I think Councillor Adams has something to say about this, Councillor, but yes, this comes up for discussion. Not infrequently, Councillor Housden, but it's not always welcomed, more concessions on the pier, because of course there are other businesses elsewhere who have, so this is a delicate balance. But anyway, I think Tim wants to say something.
Councillor Adams.
Yes, thank you. No, it's a welcome question. There were actually some restrictions on their operating footprint, I suppose you could say, in historic years, but it is certainly the intention to explore more concession opportunities both on and off the pier. So there is underutilized, unused space on the promenade. There are buildings owned by the district council that haven't been put into use in over a decade, which is something we're intending to solve really very soon. We have advertised a number of those properties, and it may be that Open Wide end up as an operator of one of those properties, who knows. They're certainly interested in expanding. So previously, they have expanded into the pier forecourt area and done some stalls, and I think there's certainly room for more of that. There's a balance, obviously. You see examples of piers elsewhere in the country where, it's every square inch is a source of income, and that's not necessarily appropriate in our circumstance. We want to have a finely presented pier, but I think there's certainly room for more.
Thank you for that. And again, my recollection was that was one of the main points of that contract, was to encourage and introduce some freedoms there. I'm getting some nods from those that were around at that time, to precisely encourage them to be more entrepreneurial and to make use of commercial opportunities.
So have they not taken those up then?
I think these are other buildings. There are other buildings on the promenade. That's what you mean, isn't it? Not.
Well, just to clarify. So as the subsidy to the pier is reduced over the years, you can see that, I believe, in the paper. Open Wide requested more ability to have concessions, but they haven't yet. Necessarily provided, I think, everything that they would want to. I think there's still much more room for development. That's a conversation that is ongoing.
Councillor Gay.
Thank you. I'm just going to say, if we can let them get back on their feet a bit after this latest series of lockdowns and so on, and things are looking well for the 2022 season. So in other words, when people are back doing things there, would it be helpful if we ask Open Wide to take us around so that they're there to answer questions? Was that the kind of thing you had in mind, or did you have in mind a member briefing here with pictures? And you meant to go to the pier, didn't you?
I have to say, my thoughts are along the lines of not just this committee members, but the wider membership of the council, I think, needs to have a greater understanding of what that pier absorbs in the way of resources, the kind of commitment that we have to it, what it delivers, and how Open Wide are a part of that arrangement. More than, if you like, walking the boards and, touching feelings, so to speak. That may be something that we might want to do after that. I don't know. But I think I'm kind of sensing there's a need for perhaps a bit more gaining an understanding about where Open Wide has been in the past couple of years, where they think they might be going in the next season and the season beyond. Would that satisfy your question?
Well, yes, it would. I think some sort of discussion, whether it's a wider discussion with Open Wide, is necessary, because okay, we may well be clear of the worst of the COVID, but they're going to hit a very, very, very rocky economic period for the next 3 or 4 years with high inflation and squeeze on incomes. And I think we need to know their perspective and try to offer them every ability to maximise their revenue from it.
Yes, I think you raise a very valid point, because undoubtedly under the profit share arrangement, this council would benefit on that profit share. So we do have an interest in that. And my only sort of tempering of that total situation is that with 2000 and 2001 were obviously not the typical season, and so therefore you wouldn't expect, I don't think, to see any significant inroads on that. But we are into a new season, and hopefully we feel rather more positive about what that season might deliver, and so a conversation along those lines would be helpful, and maybe there's a recommendation there that we might like to follow up. So right, okay, thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
That sounds like a member briefing then to me, an all-member briefing with more information coming along.
Indeed.
And I don't see why that can't be arranged.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
I should mention I have been a member of the National Peer Society. With peers, we have a choice. Either commercial, or I note we were Peer of the Year 2019. And if we're very over commercial, that kudos will never be open to us. And I would really recommend that we step lightly if we go for full commercial peer. As somebody who operated a peer, I would never have had any hope of being National Peer of the Year for 2019 because I ran it commercially. It was run commercially, and every spare inch is used commercially. And just to answer Councillor Hasden, very little money is to be made out of cash bingo. The whole point of running the bingo in the theatre is to drag people onto the pier so they spend money in all your other outlets. And quite frankly, Cromer Pier doesn't have a lot of other outlets. So that might not be a good thing. And just another thing, with the RNLI, do they make any significant contribution to the pier, or do they not?
Yeah, I think we might be bearing off the main subject. Councillor Adam.
I was just going to say, obviously, two very different subjects. Obviously, the open wide contract and the maintenance of the pier. I mean, it's almost the subject of two different member briefings. I know Russell Tanner gives a very good member briefing actually on maintenance of the pier, the history. He's been involved with it for some years, and he's done a fantastic job, of course. We're a long way ahead of where we used to be. I'm not sure of the ongoing arrangements. Obviously, there's diesel pipeline for the lifeboat, but I'm not sure necessarily whether there's any wayleave agreements or anything along those lines. But in terms of contributions to the maintenance of the pier, I don't think so. But there might be some agreements that are in place, but perhaps it's something we can answer at a later date.
Well, I think that's a reputational thing, and I think we ought to make it more public that we are so generous to such a very, very important charity.
Yes, Councillor Gay.
I agree with Harry, but I'd just like short riposte. They're also very generous to us. We got lifeguards in place last summer when it was difficult, and when we were told we would only have a reduced number, we got more, and I think they've also provided lifeguarding at well. So it is a close, shall I say, a mutually beneficial relationship.
Okay, thank you. I think we've probably got to the point where a member briefing might actually help in that. Informally, that could be explained of what the relationships are with the various organisations that either operate or have to do with the pier. And that would lead to a wider understanding, I think, not just for this committee, but for members generally.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, does that allow us to see the terms of the contract with Open Wide?
Sorry?
Would that allow us to see the terms of the contract?
Well, I guess the scope of that briefing is yet to be determined. I think that the contract, the substance of the contract, I would have thought would have been one of the key points that members could be briefed on, so that you can understand that interaction And just coming back to the point on commercialisation, I think it was the view of the council at the time the contract was negotiated that it didn't want to get involved in commercialisation because it's not a commercial operator fundamentally, and that's why it invited others who were commercial operators of theatres and piers to become involved and take on that work. Now, the degree to which they are successful in commercialisation is perhaps a matter that might be a conversation to be had with them. So that would enable members then to have a broader understanding about why they have or haven't done and taken up opportunities that have been presented or may present in the years to come. And it may be they might have a prospectus, for example, that they might say, well, you know, we had to bin the last 2 years, but the next 2 years, this is what we're hoping to do. That's the kind of thing that could emerge from that. Okay, are we done on questions? I guess that if we just deal with the formal recommendations, so that's recommendations A to D, and I think there's another recommendation that's emerged, and that is that we have a member briefing. So that's not a member, that's not just a committee member briefing for us. This is a wider membership for all councillors on those particular points of concern and discussion that we've had today. Is that the substance of what you would recognise as a reasonable recommendation to add to that? Okay, so how would you like to handle that? Would you like to handle the additional recommendation first and then them all together, or?
I think if anyone's happy to propose those standing recommendations, and then in addition with that additional recommendation, I'll just note that these recommendations have already been agreed by Cabinet. They're not going to Council. So in effect, the committee is commending those decisions taken by Cabinet.
Yes. Okay. Are you comfortable with that? So on block, then, that will be A to D with the additional recommendation for a member briefing. Could I have a proposer, please, and a seconder? Councillor Penfold and Councillor Blathwaite. A show of hands, all in favour, please. That looks like not unanimous, but okay. Councillor Holiday, are you abstaining or against? Abstaining, thank you. Right. Okay, we've done item 15, moving then to item 16, which is the update on the environment and quality of life, to receive an update on the progress from the chairman of the panel and agree a draft work programme for the 6-month period. Councillor Blathwaite, as the chairman of the panel.
Thank you. As members will know, probably we've had our first meeting. We've set out the parameters of our panel, and we are progressing. I think the most important thing is that I think we have established that the figures we have been working on are up to date. Though they are before pandemic, they are more accurate than any later figures we might accrue because of the pandemic. So I think that's what's been established so far. This is turning out to be a far more complex and important study than I had anticipated. And there is a long way to go, and we will be reporting when there is something to report. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Can I just add to that, Chairman?
Yes.
I was just going to say, for members, obviously it was always agreed as part of the terms of reference, that panel, that whilst the panel would propose their next steps, that it's up to the committee to agree that. So the draft work programme that's included on the agenda today is for the committee to vote on, to show you accept that as a way forward for the trial period of the 6 months. I will note that beyond the public conveniences review, there's also suggestion there that once that's come to an end, because we're not expecting that to take the full 6-month period, that then the environment and quality of life panel might then look at involvement in the quality of life strategy, which has been kind of coming up to a point of development. So again, it would be helping with with that process at an early stage.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, that's good.
so would you like a proposer and a seconder?
Yeah, if there's no questions.
Councillor Blathwaite as a proposer, Councillor Heinrich as a seconder. All in favour, please show. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Item 17 then is the Cabinet Work Programme.
Yep, there's not much to add here. One thing I would say, I'm going to plug the benchmarking briefing we're having tomorrow, the LG Inform session, which was requested by the committee. The reason I mention that here is because it will have some impact on, you'll see at the February cabinet meeting, the late February cabinet meeting, which technically is the March. I suppose it's very confusing how they come at the very end of the month rather than the beginning. The benchmarking data will start to be included alongside the managing performance reports. So I'd really encourage everyone to come to the briefing tomorrow morning on Zoom to really understand how that's going to work and actually provide some input into that process, as well as Cabinet seeing that benchmarking data. You as a committee will also be seeing that data, and the opportunity is there for you to look at it in a different way to Cabinet. Expect in the same way that the performance report is already. There may be things that the committee wants to focus on. So the opportunity there tomorrow at the briefing to kind of ask questions of the officers that will be preparing that benchmarking data and how it can be kind of manipulated and used and what the committee can see. So other than that, I don't think there's anything else to mention on the upcoming Cabinet Work Programme.
Okay, thank you very much. I would just echo the plea that you make, because clearly I think our ability to engage in that topic will be enhanced by that presentation. Just a question really, those who may not be available, who may not be able to attend, will the presentation be circulated?
Absolutely, we can record it. I've also got a PowerPoint presentation as well, so hopefully we can share both for anyone that isn't able to attend tomorrow.
Good, thank you. Councillor Cushing.
You just asked the question I was going to ask, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Rest, yes.
Through you, can I just ask, Matt, can you reissue the invitation for tomorrow?
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
spoken to a couple of people, and for some reason they haven't got it, or they've got a different one.
I'll share it all via email as opposed to a calendar invite, so hopefully it won't disappear for everyone in the calendar.
Okay,
So yeah,
some of them are flashing off at the moment.
I'll redo that after this meeting, so you've all got it fresh in your emails.
And thank you for the one for Turin. It was very nice. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Right, moving on then to the committee work programme.
Yes, there's a few things to update here. The first is that we were expecting, you'll remember the councillor call for action that happened. We were expecting the scoping report to come to this meeting. However, due to Councillor Withington's ongoing illness, out of respect for her and her wish to have involvement in that scoping process, I have temporarily, with the agreement of the chairman and the vice chairman, delayed that scoping report until Councillor Withington is in a better position to be able to feed into that process. I do note that in the meantime, I think there has been some changes to national legislation which have tried to close a tax loophole. So there are things happening, and that is not being forgotten. I just want everyone to know why that's not come to this meeting. The next things to note are, I'll just find the right page. For the next 2, potentially 3 months, we have some quite important briefings. So next month, we are expecting the crime disorder briefing. We will be having the new PCC attend, as well as the chief executive of his office. We previously saw and I'm always get these confused here because there's two plans within that office. The Safer Norfolk plan, I believe we reviewed in draft form last year, We'll be receiving an update on that from the Chief Executive, Mark Stokes, and then we will receive an initial briefing from the Police and Crime Commissioner on their linked but separate safer, I want to say safer policing plan, but please don't quote me on that. That could be the wrong name. So that's quite an important one, really, to see how those two strategies work together and link together, and also be useful to have an update on the implementation of that draft strategy or plan that we saw previously. As was noted earlier in the update, there will also, in April, we are expecting the officers from Serco to come back to provide a full update on that. And then also something quite important, you'll remember this was mentioned at full council. There was the Anglian Water sewage discharge motion, I believe, and there has been a request for the Scrutiny Committee to call in officers from Anglian Water. So we're looking to get that in as soon as possible, bearing in mind that we do have those two other briefings in March and April. So I'm hoping we can arrange that for May to be as soon as possible. And other than that, I think we are expecting the reef project review up in perhaps April, I believe, if I understand correctly. And that's everything from me, unless there's any questions.
Questions? Just to pick up on the point that just been made, we did see those two strategies. So that's the safer communities and the policing plan separate last year. And quite honestly, they are inextricably linked. And there's every line of every logical reason, I think, to kind of see those together, because there are situations where you want to ask one organization one question which runs over into another strategy, and then you don't get a complete answer. So by getting both together on the one occasion, that would seem to be a more holistic look at the crime and safety situation across the county and the district in particular. Councillor Adams.
Related, I just wanted to say that following the publication of the next minutes, I will give an update to members by email on the work of the Police and Crime Panel, which has been an important last meeting with the budget. Members should have had an email inviting them to a road safety event briefing, because Norfolk Constabulary are doing some work with councils across Norfolk on road safety speeding. So that might be something you wish to discuss in some further detail at a later date. But obviously, if you have any questions on the work of the Police and Crime Panel, please send me an email, and if there's anything you want to touch on in greater detail, we can come back to it.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on the work programme? No? Okay, then there's just basically the outcomes and action list, and anything you wish to add to that?
Just say Councillor Holiday emailed me over the past few days to say that she had still not received a response from EE East, and neither have I, despite chasing them. So we will continue to do that, and hopefully we can get that response in the months ahead.
Okay, right, that I think completes our agenda, and goodness me, we've got time to spare, Councillor Penfold. Thank you all very much indeed for your cooperation and contribution this afternoon, and I formally close the meeting.